Hey guys, the brutality of business wars is perfectly embodied in AT&T's founding history. Over 100 years ago, America's telecommunications industry was a ruthless battlefield. More than 6,000 small phone companies fought each other independently. If you used Company A's phone, you couldn't call someone on Company B's network, switch cities, and you had to switch devices. Users were miserable. Then AT&T was born in 1885, charging into the battlefield with the ambition to unify the industry. Its first move was brutal: secure the core patent licenses for Bell Telephone, directly choking the technical lifeline of all small companies. Want to run a phone business? Either pay exorbitant patent fees or get sued into bankruptcy. The patent encirclement was just the start. AT&T immediately launched a two-front war. On one side, it poured massive funds into laying long-distance telephone lines, crossing from New York to Chicago in 15 years, connecting the entire U.S. main line in 38 years, and even extending lines to Europe in 1927, forming a monopoly barrier through network coverage. On the other side, it adopted predatory pricing plus acquisition harvesting. For regional small companies, it either undercut prices below cost to steal users, forcing them into bankruptcy before buying them out cheaply, or directly offered high prices to buy them outright. In just 20 years, it swallowed up thousands of competitors. By the early 20th century, AT&T controlled over 90% of America's telephone business. Phone equipment had to be from its subsidiary Western Electric, and even Bell Labs became its technical moat. Back then, AT&T was the uncrowned king of telecommunications. But a monopoly this big was bound to attract trouble. Not only were small companies complaining, but emerging forces like MCI were secretly plotting, and even the government had set its sights on it. Would this monopoly war dominated by AT&T eventually backfire? In 1974, the U.S. Department of Justice's antitrust lawsuit became the trigger to break the monopoly, but behind it was a thrilling business war game. This wasn't the first time AT&T had been investigated. It had escaped unscathed in 1913 and 1949 through lobbying and technical barriers. But this time was different. MCI, an emerging carrier, had long been biding its time. It secretly allied with companies like Sprint to collect evidence of AT&T's abuse of monopoly power and lobbied heavily in Congress, turning antitrust into a national issue. AT&T didn't sit idly by either. It deployed a top legal team to delay the lawsuit, retaliated against MCI with network cutoff threats, and even deliberately raised interconnection fees to strangle MCI in its cradle. In the long-distance telephone market back then, AT&T also engaged in bundled sales, forcing users to use its equipment to access long-distance services, maxing out the ruthlessness of business warfare. The lawsuit dragged on for 10 years, becoming one of the bloodiest antitrust business wars in U.S. commercial history. In 1984, the verdict took effect. AT&T was split into 8 companies. One retained long-distance and international services, and 7 local companies became the Baby Bells. On the day of the split, AT&T's stock plummeted 20%, evaporating tens of billions in market value, while companies like MCI and Sprint celebrated wildly, launching half-price long-distance packages overnight and snatching up a large number of users in an instant. Even worse, the split Baby Bells betrayed their former parent company. They no longer offered preferential terms to AT&T, but instead allied with emerging companies to launch price wars. Within 4 years, long-distance call rates plummeted 40%, and AT&T's long-distance market share collapsed from over 90% to 50%, completely shattering its most stable source of income. With its monopoly wings clipped, could AT&T survive in this battlefield surrounded by competitors? After the split, AT&T completely panicked in the business war, making a series of disastrous moves that pushed itself to the brink of ruin. It originally wanted to stage a comeback through long-distance telephone and equipment manufacturing, but as soon as it made a move, it encountered MCI's suicidal price war. MCI slashed intercontinental long-distance rates below cost just to grab market share. AT&T was forced to follow suit with price cuts, halving its profits outright. Even more fatal, the management made a catastrophic mistake of cutting off its own arms. In 1995, it decided to spin off its equipment manufacturing division into Lucent Technologies and its computer business into NCR, leaving only long-distance services for itself. They thought this would allow them to focus on the business war, but they never imagined it would be a gift to their competitors. As soon as Lucent became independent, it was besieged by Ericsson and Nokia. Meanwhile, without its own equipment supply chain, AT&T's procurement costs soared, putting it at a greater disadvantage in the price war. Lucent enjoyed a brief boom thanks to Bell Labs' technology, but it made the cardinal sin of blind expansion in business warfare. Madly acquiring small companies led to a cash flow crisis, and it was eventually acquired by France's Alcatel at a low price, withdrawing from the stage completely. NCR fared even worse, directly squeezed by giants like IBM and reduced to a marginal role. As for AT&T itself, it also missed the mobile internet boom. When mobile phones were just emerging, competitors like Verizon were frantically building base stations, but AT&T was obsessed with long-distance services. By the time it reacted, the mobile market had already been divided up. In 2000, it made another foolish decision to split into 4 companies, selling off high-quality assets like mobile and enterprise services for cash, leaving only long-distance services to linger on. Its market value dropped 80% from its peak, making it a laughingstock in the business war. No one expected that the company that would eventually acquire it would be one of the baby bells spun off back then, SBC Communications. What business strategy was behind this classic small fish eats big fish acquisition? In 2005, the global business community was shocked. SBC Communications announced the acquisition of AT&T for $16 billion. This small fish eats big fish move wasn't luck. It was a business strategy that SBC had been plotting for years. Founded in 1984, SBC initially only handled local services in the southern U.S., but it quietly rose through precision acquisitions plus cost control. It first acquired Pacific Telesis to capture the western market, then merged with Ameritech to open up the central region, gradually becoming a regional hegemon. When it set its sights on AT&T, it had already done the math. Although AT&T was losing money, it had a global international communications network and a century-old brand, exactly the ticket to go global that SBC lacked. Even more shrewdly, SBC struck when AT&T's stock price was low, offering $16 billion, just 10% above its market value. A classic bottom-fishing acquisition. After the acquisition, SBC's business acumen was fully revealed. It retained the AT&T brand, instantly saving tens of billions in brand promotion costs, and lured back a large number of users with nostalgia for the iconic brand. At the same time, it integrated its local services, broadband resources with AT&T's international network, forming an end-to-end advantage of local plus long-distance plus international, directly surpassing Verizon to become America's largest telecommunications carrier. In 2006, it struck again, acquiring Bell South for $67 billion and taking over Singular, then America's largest mobile carrier. Singular had a large number of high-quality base stations and users, and this move directly filled SBC's gap in mobile services, securing a foothold in the mobile business war. The reborn AT&T became a winner in the business war, but it wasn't satisfied. This time, it was going to make an even bigger bet, crossing over to acquire a media giant to build a network plus content business empire. Could this $100 billion cross-border business war succeed? In 2018, AT&T dropped a bombshell, an $85.4 billion acquisition of Time Warner. This cross-border business war was full of tension from the start. Back then, although AT&T was the leader in the telecommunications industry, the price war in the mobile and broadband markets had entered a red ocean with shrinking profits. Its plan was clever. Tie its communication network, the pipeline, with Time Warner's HBO and Warner Brothers content, the water source. Launch exclusive content plus mandatory bundling, forcing users to only use its network to watch exclusive shows, completely escaping the price war. But the acquisition had two major opponents. First, streaming giants like Disney and Netflix, which feared AT&T would monopolize high-quality content and allied to lobby the government against it. Second, former U.S. President Trump, who publicly stated that this would lead to media monopoly and pressured the Department of Justice to investigate. To win, AT&T spent heavily on a top legal team and even spun off some businesses in advance as a compromise. This capital showdown was extremely tough. Although AT&T eventually won the lawsuit and renamed Time Warner Warner Media, it still couldn't avoid the pitfalls of the cross-border business war. Disney and Netflix took the opportunity to launch a content war, pouring money into producing shows to steal users. AT&T never established its exclusive content advantage. Even worse, the integration of Network Plus content was a complete failure. It wanted to offer HBO for free with broadband subscriptions, but users didn't buy it, instead complaining that bundled packages were too expensive. The telecommunications business wasn't boosted, and the media business even lost money due to the pandemic. The $200 billion in debt incurred from the acquisition became the final straw that broke the camel's back, with annual interest payments alone exceeding $10 billion. Competitors Verizon and T-Mobile took the opportunity to launch a new round of price wars, stealing its mobile and broadband users. AT&T's $100 billion cross-border gamble was a total loss, and it had to grit its teeth and cut its losses to survive. Would this brutal cross-border business war push it into total decline? When new CEO John Stankey took over in 2020, AT&T was already on the verge of collapse in the business war. Burdened with $200 billion in debt, Verizon and T-Mobile were frantically stealing market share in the mobile market, and streaming platforms were squeezing Warner Media's living space. Stankey had no choice but to make a tough decision: cut its losses to survive. In 2021, AT&T announced the spin-off of Warner Media, merging it with Discovery to form Warner Brothers Discovery, raising a large amount of cash to repay debts. This move was risky, but it was a necessary business decision. Without abandoning the media business, AT&T would be dragged down by debt, and even its core telecommunications business would be lost. But the cost was extremely heavy. It not only lost Warner's high-quality content, but also missed the golden age of streaming development, essentially handing over a piece of fat to its competitors. After spinning off Warner Media, AT&T immediately narrowed its focus, redirecting all resources to its core telecommunications business, and launched large-scale layoffs to cut costs, preparing for a do-or-die battle with Verizon and T-Mobile. But its competitors didn't give it a chance to breathe. T-Mobile launched unlimited data low-cost packages, stealing a large number of young users. Verizon focused on high-end business users, poaching corporate clients with high-quality services. AT&T's revenue fell from $181 billion in 2019 to $120.7 billion in 2022, and its market value was surpassed by both rivals. Just when everyone thought it would withdraw from the business war stage, AT&T bet its last chips on 5G, a new track in the telecommunications industry where seizing the first-mover advantage meant regaining the right to speak. This 5G business war became its do-or-die battle. After abandoning the media business, AT&T went all in on the 5G business war, investing $20 billion in building networks and competing for frequency bands. Knowing it was behind in mobile users, it took a different approach. On one hand, it partnered with AST SpaceMobile to launch commercial satellites, achieving direct mobile phone-to-satellite communication to capture the blank market in remote areas, avoiding direct confrontation with T-Mobile and Verizon. On the other hand, it accelerated the deployment of fiber optic broadband, completing its target of 30 million fiber optic ports ahead of schedule, and stealing household users with fiber plus 5G bundled packages. Even more aggressively, it launched Internet Air, a 5G fixed wireless broadband product, directly targeting traditional broadband and stealing users from broadband giants like Comcast with the advantages of no installation fees and low prices. This differentiated business war soon paid off. In the first quarter of 2025, AT&T's business war counterattack yielded results. Revenue increased by 2% year-on-year, mobile services achieved 18 consecutive quarters of year-on-year growth, and Internet Air users soared 4 times, becoming a new growth driver. It also launched Ask AT&T, a generative AI tool to optimize network operations, upgrade code, and improve customer service efficiency, further reducing costs and increasing efficiency. But the 5G business war is far from over. T-Mobile has already achieved 85% 5G coverage and is launching subsidy wars like buy a phone, get a year of free data. Verizon is partnering with tech companies to develop 5G industrial applications, seizing the high-end B2B market. Even Elon Musk's Starlink is competing for satellite communication business. How long can AT&T's differentiated advantage last? Can it regain its position as the industry leader through the 5G business war? Over nearly 150 years, AT&T's development history is an epic of brutal business wars. It became a monopoly king through patent encirclement and acquisition harvesting, only to be split in the antitrust business war. After the split, it made a series of disastrous moves, retreating steadily in price wars and becoming a target for acquisition by a former subsidiary. After rebirth, it returned to the peak through integration and acquisitions, only to stumble in the cross-border media business war. Now it's betting on 5G, launching a difficult counterattack in the differentiated business war. It is no longer a monopolistic giant dominating the market, but a warrior struggling to survive in a battlefield surrounded by competitors. Every rise and every fall hides the most real business games, either eat or be eaten. Back then, technologies from Bell Labs helped it win early business wars. Now, can 5G and AI become its new business war weapons? Faced with T-Mobile's price encirclement, Verizon's high-end positioning, and the impact of cross-border players, can AT&T's differentiated strategy continue to work? This 150-year-old business war veteran has gone through countless life-or-death battles and is still looking for answers to survive. Its next business war layout will not only determine its own fate, but also rewrite the competitive landscape of the global telecommunications industry. Will AT&T's business war legend continue? Feel free to drop a comment below and share your favorite business war moments.